Hi guys, so today we'll take a look at the newly released Hall-Vet keyboard from Lamzu, the Jet75HE. Specs-wise, they mentioned this keyboard to be able to do 8000Hz polling and 32,000Hz scan rate, with the scan rate meaning a single key scan rate like usually on these boards, which is a bit of a marketing talk, but pretty much every company does this now. Then it has these 3 multimedia keys and 2 knobs on the left hand side, and overall the keyboard is sporting a 75% layout with JERRORR Jade gaming switches. Taking a closer look at the case, we have an aluminium top housing which feels very nice, and the bottom piece is plastic with these graphic elements to add a little bit spice to the mix. We also have these adjustable feet to adjust the typing angle to your liking. Based on my measurements, the angles are 5 degrees without the feet, 9 degrees on the middle position, and 12 degrees with the highest setting. This board does come in 2 different colorways, the other one being the original Lamzu colorway of blue and white that Lamzu was originally known for with their first mouse release, so it's nice to see them using that here as well. This yellow, black and white one I have goes really well with my twin edition Skypad, so I just had to choose this one. There is also this tiny light bar on the right hand side which you can customize the color of with the software. Overall the case seems to be made really well. It's built very solid, and I prefer having these multimedia keys and knobs on the left hand side. Usually we see these knobs being on the right hand side, which honestly takes unnecessary space and it forces you to have your keyboard further onto the left, kind of off-centered from my preferred position, but with this I can have it close to my mousepad very comfortably. The biggest knob acts as your volume control like usually, and the lower one is for profile switching. The other buttons are from top to bottom: next track, play and pause, and previous track. This time I actually have no clue what sound dampening stuff they use here, since I could not find any screws to open this thing up and I didn't want to force it open risking breaking it, but whatever they use here, I think they have done a great job with reducing any pinginess or hollowness of the case. I would assume also that the plate material is steel, since it's very unbendy, but pressing on the top half I get some amount of flexiness and a slight creaking sound of the plate rubbing on the case or something, so it's possible they use some sort of gasket mounting method here. The keycaps they use are reverse dice-up PVT with a wall thickness of around 1.4 millimeters, and the overall consistency of the Legend seems to be fairly great here. I love how they went with cherry profile non-shine through keycaps, which I think is the way to go for better typing experience and a cleaner aesthetic. The stabilizers are plate mounted, but honestly they are implemented really well here and looped pretty nicely as well, so I have no wire ticking and rattling on them whatsoever. The spacebar does have a noticeable high frequency ping, which I think is because of the plate material they have used. For the switches they went with JERRORR Jade gamings, and I'm not really sure if any other pre-built uses these yet. They are my least favorite sounding switch from JERRORR's lineup, since they are just a clackier, slightly more stable version of the Jade Pros. They have the box stem just like the TTC King of Magnetics, and they do share some similarities in clackiness that I just don't personally enjoy that much. The stem wobble is however quite minimal, which is a nice thing for increased stability. With the higher sensitivities with rapid trigger and extremely low dead zones this thing can also do. The actuation force and travel distances are the same as with Jade Pros, so 36 gram force and 3.5 millimeters, so they feel good in that regard, but I would have liked them to use the Pros here instead. Here is a quick sound test. Then let's talk about the performance of this board. So they have mentioned the scan rate to be 36,000 Hz and the polling rate to be 8,000 Hz, but based on the keyboard inspector test, the real full keyboard scan rate and polling rates are 8,000 Hz, so it does true 8K polling, which is good. For the latency, this board measured pretty well at around 1.3 milliseconds, but for true 8K polling keyboard, they could squeeze a bit more performance if they would want that. The Wooting 68G Plus module running at full 1000 Hz measures pretty much the same, which reinforces how much impact of a really optimized firmware has for the overall latency of the keyboard. In real use, however, this board feels very responsive, and I have to point out here that the impact of keyboard latency is much less impactful as the motion latency of your mouse, for example. With the mouse, you have the mouse constantly send data packets that update the cursor position on your screen, and a relatively high latency would be noticeable with a higher response rate monitor. But with a keyboard, a single key press is just a single data point, and perceiving latency from that is very hard from numbers that are this low. That being said, I understand the point of wanting to optimize every point of your setup to be the fastest possible, and I do that myself as well. I have a theory that the biggest benefit here with the lower latency numbers is mostly psychological, and some may play better and more confidently when they know their setup is tweaked to the max. But yeah, that is enough latency discussion this time. Let's check out their software next. So with the software, you can do pretty much the basic stuff, and you have things like SOCD, rapid, snappy, and dynamic keystrokes. It's kind of funny that they went with the Wooting's naming on the features, so I guess rapid snappy is now the real technical term for the feature. The software is a working thing, but there are some bugs that are somewhat annoying. Firstly, the language setting seems to always reset to Chinese, so I need to always change it to English whenever I visit the page. Then if you ever happen to upgrade your firmware, it doesn't really tell you to recalibrate the switches. So at first I thought my keyboard got bricked when all my keys were just stuck at red RGB and only some keys were working. But yeah, after every upgrade, you should recalibrate the switches. Then the actuation point sliders and the visualization here is kinda cluttered. But to go over these, the second slider is your regular travel distance that the key needs to travel to actuate. The slider before that is the distance it needs to travel to actuate again after being reset with rapid trigger enabled, and the distance it needs to be lifted is the third slider. So the order here is kind of confusing. Then the last two sliders are your top and bottom dead zones. So quite a bit of adjustments can be made here, which is quite good. It just can be a bit overwhelming and confusing at first. The lowest actuation can be set to 0.1 millimeters, and the lowest rapid trigger values can be set as low as 0.01 millimeters, which is very, very low. And when the dead zones are removed completely, there seems to be a very minimal hidden dead zone lower than the measuring device I have can measure. Then we have the RGB settings, such as the setting to adjust the small light bar, but these are kind of wonky as well. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, and currently they don't seem to do anything. As for customizing the left side keys, currently I could not customize them at all, which is a bummer if you would want to use those media keys as a small stream deck of sorts instead of the media control keys. So overall, I would like to see them work on the software a bit to make the experience more seamless for the user. Luckily, all the critical features are working, and with some tweaking you can get everything working just as you want. It's just not as convenient as let's say Wooting's or Geonworks Venom software. But all in all, I think this is a good keyboard. It's built well, it performs nicely, and for a pre-built is a nice package with a convenient layout. There are some issues with the software that I would like to get tweaked, and personally I don't really like Jade gaming switches that much, but that one is up to everyone's tastes. That is all for this one. Thanks for watching, and see you on the next one. Goodbye.